Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Sinai Temple. Thank you so much for joining us for this truly extraordinary program. I'm honored to be here with my dear colleague and friend, Cantor Matt Austerklein, who's going to be providing us with a deep dive into the world of Hazzanut. And it's going to be extremely special and moving and full of a lot of education and I think a lot of surprises too. But tonight, as we know across the Jewish world, we are beginning Yom Hazikaron. So before we turn to our program, we're going to pause to mark a solemn moment in the life of our people, the Jewish people. Today is Yom Hazikaron, which is Israel's Memorial Day, when we honor and remember the soldiers who gave their lives defending the state of Israel and the victims of terror who were taken from us simply for living as Jews in their land. Yom HaZikaron is a day of national grief, but also of deep gratitude. It reminds us that the freedom and the life that we cherish did not come easily. It was secured through unimaginable courage and sacrifice. Here at Sinai Temple, we stand always in solidarity with the people and the state of Israel, and with families all around the world who carry the loss of a loved one in their hearts every single day. And so tonight, we'll take a brief moment to honor their memory. We will light a memorial candle, a ner tamid, symbolizing that their light continues to shine in our world. And in memory of the fallen soldiers of the state of Israel, we recite the words of the Kel Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer asking for God to grant rest to the souls of the fallen. I ask you to please rise. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bameromim, Hametzei menucha nechona al kanfei hashechina b'mahalot kedoshim utehorim vegiborim kezohar harakia mazhirim לנשמות הקדושים שנלחמו בכל מערכות ישראל במחתרת ובצבא הגנה לישראל ושנפלו במלחמתם ומסרו נפשם על קידוש השם העם והארץ בעבור שאנו מתפללים עלוי נשמותיהם לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור החיים את נשמותיהם אדוני הוא נחלתם בגן עדן די מנוחתם וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם ותעמוד לכל ישראל זכותם ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ הימין ונאמר Amen. El Malei Rachamim, God full of mercy and compassion, source of the spirits of all humankind, remember, we pray, you, the pure souls of our sons and daughters who heroically gave their lives in defense of the people and the land. Swifter than eagles, stronger than lions, they fought for the liberation of their people and homeland, sacrificing their lives for Israel's rebirth in its holy land. They breathed a spirit of strength and courage into the whole house of Israel. in the land and in the diaspora, inspiring it to go forward towards its redemption and liberation. Remember them, our God, for good, together with the myriad holy ones and heroes of Israel from ancient times until today. May their souls be bound in the bonds of everlasting life. May the Garden of Eden be their resting place. And may they rest in peace. Let us say, Amen. And we will conclude this miniature tekes, this miniature ceremony for Yom Hazikaron, by singing our words of hope, Hatikva, affirming that our hope is not lost after 2,000 years and that their sacrifices continue to inspire a vibrant Jewish future. You may be seated. It is truly my privilege to introduce our guest tonight, someone who is not only a brilliant scholar and a gifted cantor, but also a longtime personal friend. I've known Cantor Matt Austerklein for over a decade now, hard to believe. Our paths first crossed through the world of Hazzanut, and I quickly realized that Matt wasn't just a talented performer, but has also become one of the foremost scholars and authorities on the history and artistry of Jewish and cantorial music. Over the years, we've shared many experiences, including an unforgettable journey together through Jewish Spain, exploring the ancient roots of our musical and liturgical tradition. His passion for understanding the Jewish past and making it come alive is truly inspiring. Cantor Austerklein's journey is extraordinary. He studied music at the College of William and Mary, receiving his cantorial ordination and master's degree at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and has just completed writing his dissertation in Jewish studies at the Halle-Wittenberg University in Germany. His research focuses on the early modern development of the cantorate, uncovering how Ashkenazi cantors emerged as musical and spiritual leaders from the 16th to 18th centuries. He has served distinguished pulpits across the United States and has performed, lectured, and taught internationally. His writings on Jewish music, Hazzanut, and synagogue life appear widely, from scholarly journals to his popular Substack blog, engaging both academics and lay readers alike. He is also a founding member of the Wizards of Ashkenaz, a pioneering cantorial a cappella group that brings historic Jewish music into a fresh contemporary sound. Cantor Austerklein has received multiple honors for his work, including the prestigious Cantor Samuel Rosenbaum Award for Scholarship and Creativity from the Cantors Assembly. He continues to mentor cantorial students from around the world, shaping the next generation of Jewish musical leadership. Cantor Austerklein just accepted an appointment to be the first ever Chazan of Anshe Torah in Plano, Texas. Kol hakavod. Tonight, in honor of Yom Hazikaron, and as part of our ongoing celebration of Jewish resilience and creativity, Cantor Austerklein will present Secrets of the Cantor, the mysterious origins of Hazzanut revealed. a musical lecture concert that will open a window into the hidden history of our sacred art. We're going to feature some live performances, storytelling, and maybe some communal singing as well. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to my friend and colleague, Cantor Matt Austerklein.
Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoseinu Avoseinu Sheibane Beis HaMikdash B'meira v'yameinu V'sein chelkeinu v'sorasecha Sheibane Beis HaMikdash B'meira v'yameinu Yehi ratzon milfanecha ratzon yehi Sheibane Beis HaMikdash B'meira v'yameinu B'sein chelkeinu b'soirasecha Sheibane Beis HaMikdash B'meira v'yameinu B'sein chelkeinu b'sorasecha Sheibane Beis HaMikdash B'meira v'yameinu Yehi ratzon milfanecha ratzon yehi Ratzon milfanecha Yehi ratzon milfanecha Sheibane Beis HaMikdash Sheibane Beis HaMikdash B'meira v'yameinu B'meira v'yameinu V'sein chelkeinu b'sorasecha Hoi v'sham in avodecha be'yira. V'sham avodecha be'yira. Ki me'olam ukshanim kanmonios sheyipanei beis hamikdash b'meira ve'yameinu v'sein chelkeinu v'sorasecha sheyipanei beis hamikdash b'meira ve'yameinu yehi ratzon milfanecha yehi ratzon sheyipanei beis hamikdash b'meira ve'yameinu v'sein chelkeinu v'sorasecha sheyipanei beis hamikdash b'meira ve'yameinu v'sein chelkeinu v'sorasecha sheyipanei beis hamikdash b'meira ve'yameinu ki me'olam ukeshanim kadmonios.
Thank you so much to my friend Cantor Feldman and to Mr. Benjamin Fingerhut. It's such a pleasure to be in a true house of Hazzanut, that is Sinai Temple. My name is Cantor Matt Austerklein, and thank you for coming this evening, not only to commemorate Yom Hazikaron, a momentous moment for our people, but to explore the depths of the secrets of the Cantor, the mysterious origins of Hazzanut revealed. This evening we opened with Israel Shore's Sheyiboneh Beis HaMikdash, one of the most iconic pieces of cantorial music. How many of you have heard it before? We got some good hands. We're over 50% here, probably 65. It includes some of the things you come to expect when you hear Hazzanut. Melody, improvisation, melismas, a bit of zogging, of saying text very fast, sportamento, and that crying classic Eastern European sound. We cantors speak about Hazzanut with reverence as a time-honored traditional art form and whose liturgical melodies, whose nusach, go all the way back to the revelations of Mount Sinai, or if not, at least to the Beis HaMikdash b'meira v'yameinu, the temple in Jerusalem. Now, it feels good, right, to know that our music is old, right? Why? There's so much new music, right? It's good. Why does old provenance, as we say in the antique world, matter? One of the reasons is that it gives us a profound sense of mission. Like we are links in a great musical chain, and this is not just true in Judaism for music, it's also true for law as well. In Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers begin with this very idea. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, u'mesara Yoshua, v'Yoshua lizkenim, u'zkenim ninviim, u'nviim misarua la'anshe Knesset HaGdolah. Moses received the Torah at Mount Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua, and Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the men of the great assembly. And so we Jews in today are part of that same line of transmission of Torah. So too for the musical revelations that have been passed down to us. This principle was embraced by Rabbi Jacob Merlin, known as the Maharil, that great 14th century medieval cantor rabbi, and author, who ruled for all Ashkenazi Jews to preserve their traditional local melodies. And this was even echoed in explicit terms as late as the late 16th century. Rabbi David Ulmo, sorry, wrong guy. Rabbi David Ulmo, not Elmo, sorry, was a cantor and a klezmer musician, and in this recently rediscovered manuscript guide for cantors and Kabbalists, which I discovered in Oxford over the last 6 months, he wrote this called Michtam LeDavid, and he says, quote, "We must make our prayers and services with holiness and purity," he writes in the year 1600, which is pretty early for Jewish music sources, "using our old melodies of Shabbat and festivals, which, without a doubt, were established by the Tanaim and the Amoraim, the rabbis of the Talmud. To these, some cantors have come to add, intermixing and exchanging some foreign tunes between those pious melodies. It makes my soul grieve." Now, what does this tell us? That not only was there a canon of traditional Ashkenazi melodies by the late Middle Ages, but that just a century and a half later, just over 400 years ago, high holiday melodies could be considered by religious Jews as dating back a further 1,000 years to the Mishnah and Talmud. But how much can we really know about how old Jewish music is, let alone Hazzanut? Can we take Rabbi Ulmo/Elmo for granted that high holiday melodies are over 2,000 years old? Or is digging into the mysterious origins of Jewish music and Hazzanut more like exploring sedimentary rock, where we can see different layers from major historical events, even if we can't witness or hear the events today? So let's go back in time and see what we can find out about the mysterious origins of Hazzanut together. Let's take you back to the 15th century. Benjamin.
Adonai Elohei Israel, Shuv mecharon apecha, v'nachem al hara lamecha, ובכל זאת שמך לא שכחנו, אל תשכחנו. Adonai Elohei Israel, Shuv mecharon apecha, v'nachem al hara le'amecha. Shuv mecharonecha verachem segula asher bacharta. Adonai Elohei Israel, Shuv mecharon apecha, v'nachem al hara lamecha.
First of all, thank you to Mr. Benjamin Fingerhut for that beautiful improvised accompaniment. This is, to my knowledge, the oldest piece of Ashkenazic synagogue music that we have notated. It was discovered in 2015 by the musicologist Martha Stellmacher in a 15th century Latin manuscript held at the Prague Castle in the Czech Republic. Anyone seen the Prague Castle? I see a couple. Yeah, you were near. You were so close to the oldest piece that we have. Written in a Bohemian rhombic style notation, the melody is a responsive for the Ashkenazic liturgy of Tachanun, the penitential liturgy recited on weekdays after the Amidah. Dr. Stellmacher believes that this was most likely written down by a fascinated Christian who notated the prayers of a Jew while seeking to understand both their theology and liturgy and sound. Now, Christians writing down Jewish melodies? Was ist das? How odd. But, of course, it shouldn't be so surprising because Christians invented sheet music itself. The origins of Western music notation came from the Emperor Charlemagne, or Charles I, who needed a way to standardize melodies across his vast Carolingian empire, which extended across France, Germany, and northern Italy. You can see how big of a area of land he was trying to control and have all sing the same song. While this evolved into Gregorian chant with its familiar bar line and staff, as we know from medieval music, the very first notations in Charlemagne's era were actually neumes. You see those little scratch marks? Which appeared above and below words in order to aid the singer with remembering whether the melody goes up or down. Now, this sort of thing should be a little familiar to Jewish people. Why? Because it was, thank you, I hear little murmurs of trope. Yes. Across the Mediterranean, this was being used in a different form in Tiberias, where the Masoretes used neumes for notating Torah cantillations rather than church melodies in a system we know today as Tamei Mikra or trope. So these neumes, while they were related to vastly different traditions, were the same techniques for notating music applied in different languages and cultures. But let's get back to so you can see a little bit of this is the Leningrad Codex. You can see some of the oldest trope that we have. Let's get back to our Tachanun. When I sang this a couple minutes ago, it sounded a lot like Gregorian chant, right? And that's because this that we're looking at is all the information that the transcription gives us. I don't for a minute believe that late medieval Hazzanut sounded like pure voweled monks. The transcription itself, whose Hebrew is a little faulty because the Christian who notated it didn't speak Hebrew, does nevertheless show, as you could hear, that Hazzanut was a sung liturgy with not a few melismas involved, even in this early 14th century era, which is right around the time that the Maharil is writing in the 14th century, or 15th century as well. Now, the connection between Gregorian chant and the synagogue, this is a hot topic for musicologists. I'm sure you'll see it on social media. It's a hot topic. Scholars like Edelson and Werner pointed to similarities in form between some of the oldest Ashkenazi melodies and some church melodies, like this one, which you probably know.
Baruch hu et Adonai,
which is similar to an 8th century Gregorian hymn.
iste confessor Domini colentes.
So the connection between early church music and synagogue melodies, it's a long debate, with many scholars hoping they will make a connection to lead them back to those pure legendary melodies of the Jerusalem temple. But it's a little more hope than fact. Truthfully, Gregorian hymns are different than Jewish ones. They follow different rules of psalmody, and in fact, Jewish melodies often have far more variety than their Christian counterparts. While I won't weigh in much further on this debate, I will point out that Ashkenazic chant remained orally passed down, transmitted through the synagogue and the home, but like all oral art forms, it was naturally improvised. It had natural variety, with no notation to provide exact rhythms and notes. So it had a little flexibility, and we are going to see that in this next melody. Thanks to another very curious, if confused, Christian. This was rediscovered by Israel Adler in the 1980s. This is known as the Munich Zur Mishelo, a song for the Shabbat table, and it appears to have been written down between 1505 and 1518. And you can see this is like next gen after the Neumes, a version of old Western chant from the 16th century. I will sing the whole thing for you now, and I want you to notice that this Christian scholar notated very specific, slight melodic variations between the verses, just like in oral traditions of strophic poetry across the world. So I'm going to sing you the whole thing, and it's going to sound similar in between, but listen for slight differences. This is the oldest Shabbos Zemer that we know.
Zur Mishelo chalnu barchu emunai sovanu vehosanu kidbar Adonai Zur Mishelo chalnu barchu emunai sovanu vehosanu kidbar Adonai.
Second verse, a little bit different.
Hazanes olamo roenu avinu Achanu es lachem oveyeno shosinu Alkeino delishmo unhalelo befinu Amarnu ve'aninu kein kadosh kadomai Beshir ve'kotoda neborek lelohenu Al eretz chemda sheikil avosenu Mazon betzedach ispi hanavshenu Chasto gavar aleinu ve'emes Adonai.
Slight little differences in between each verse. It gets very, very different. I'm going to give you the last verse now.
Ibane hamikdash yitzion temale Nashir shir chadash u'b'nanale Harachman hanikdash yisbarach v'yisale Al kos yayin male v'irkas Adonai.
Again, a strophic melody, but slight little variations. It's not slavishly in one form like you would if you had to you'd be uniting an entire empire with singing the exact same way. But because it is oral, it has variety. Now, we get a really special treat. There we go. So, what do we know about Hazzanut so far? We know that it emerges from an oral music culture of Ashkenazic Jews who pass their melodies on from generation to generation with natural variation, whether in chant like our Tachanun or even in very regular strophic melodies like in Zur Mishelo. But you should know also that Hazzanut develops in a world where most books are sung. Have you ever been around someone who's singing a book? It's a very odd and experience. I have never had it, but I'm sure it is odd. But it was a very normal experience 400 years ago in this age. Whole books and poems were not just read, they were sung via contrafact. If you wanted to hear King Arthur in medieval Yiddish, and you could, you would take the manuscript or book and sing the text to a pre-existing tune. We do this with Adon Olam all the time, but back then, most reading was an act of singing. That can make you understand very quickly how Hazzanut developed as the musical art of reading the prayer book. So this is an example where we have our very own tune, Zur Mishelo, was used for this Yiddish poem, Die Lied auf die Schreife von Venedig, a satirical poem describing Jews behaving badly during a fire in Venice in 1510. The poem, written by the Italian Jewish grammarian Elia Levita in the early 16th century, is in ottava rima, which is a declaimed Italian poetic form still in use today. But the contrafact is written out on top, Benigen Zur Mishelo. And using my friend Avery Gosfeld's ingenious performance combination of transcribing these words with the Zur Mishelo, I will give you a sense of how this parody song was sung. Let's start with learning this tune a little bit so you can play okay, here we go. Good. Why don't you try singing it with me, and then I will apply it to this text. I nai 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 I nai 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 with me. I, nine, 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 and diddy, die, die, die. I, nine, 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 and diddy, die, die. Diddy, die, 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 die. Yai, die, 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 die. Try that. Diddy, die, 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 die. Yai, die, 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 die. Diddy, die, 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 die. Diddy, die, 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 die. I, die, die, die. Try the whole thing. Diddy, die, 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 die. And diddy, die, die, die. I, die, die, die. And diddy, dum, bum, bye. Diddy, dum, bum, 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 bye. Diddy, dum, bum, 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 bye. Diddy, die, 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 die. I, die, 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 die. And now I'll give you a little bit there of the Western Yiddish. Nun will ich ein Witzig singen mit meinem Busenkeul von neu geschehen Dingen, die Edelmann wissen soll. Und der Makel, der Magete, was gewesen, der Dosig Moll, zuwendig in der Sreife, Asche Sore Babunai. Es war sein großen Jomer, der dort brennt der alt. Und heute freut man ihren Lomer von Juden, jung und alt. Juden ruft Juden, dass sie kämen bald. Und Lux gerät auf Lüden, Leman Abunai. And this is how people would sing these Purim parodies, and these were actually things that when Purim came around, some of the stuff that is sort of the gossip would kind of come out, and that's a little of what comes out in a song like this. But fortunately, everyone knows Sur Mishalo from being at Shabbos, so they have a tune to sing this to. Okay. Okay, very good. Onward. Yet, this oral Ashkenazi tradition may be more porous than we think. Oral traditions are a little bit, how to say, promiscuous might be the word, because the ear hears whether it likes to or not. And the German streets were filled with music, processions, mini singers, civic musicians, and street songs. And so let me take you once more to another Sabbath table song which holds a possible secret to the origins of Hazzanut. This comes from the research of Dr. Naomi Cohen-Zentner on the origins of the Shabbat Zemer Kol Mekadesh Shvi, which you can see here in Hebrew on the right. As Dr. Zentner has pointed out, the Ashkenazi melody of Kol Mekadesh appears in 17th century Catholic hymn books from Hildesheim, Cologne, Würzburg, Mainz, and Prague to the tune of Der Brüder Weizton. This is an oral German melody. And that Jews were actually singing the Shabbat song to a Christian hymn is actually borne out by a rabbinic text from this era. Rabbi Yusuf Hahn of Frankfurt asks in his custom book, Yosef Ometz, is it forbidden to sing non-Jewish melodies such as Kol Mekadesh on Friday nights in the synagogue? So apparently, if he's asking this question, people might have been doing it. Whether it was forbidden or not, and it has been passed down through the Ashkenazic tradition as a variant of that very melody that you see here on the left. But here's the kicker. Dr. Zentner has implied in her research that actually the moves within this melody are quite analogous to the motifs from the Shacharit service itself, from the Nusach. Take a listen. Kol Mekadesh Shvi karui loi, Kol Shomer Shabbos kadas mechaleloi, Sechar meyoi da pipoloi, Yish al machanei u'keish al digloi, Befi sharim et Yishalal, Uvedivrei tzadikim et Yisborach, U'yelshon Chasidim tisromam uvekerev kedoshim tiskodash. So, what does this mean? It means that not only is Nusach heavily influenced by the inner melodic structures of German song, but that one of the distinctive things about Jewish chant is taking pre-existing melodies and stretching them over long bunches of text. And I can tell you from other Yiddish and Hebrew poems that this is true in other places as well. So one of the secrets of Hazzanut is not its antiquity, but its adaptability. Baking in elements from the world around, but applying and even subordinating them to Jewish purposes and Jewish sacred texts. Here, that means that the melodic contours of a Lutheran hymn are actually share broad melodic and structural elements with Shabbos morning davening. But now we get exciting as we're getting into the early modern era, the 17th and 18th centuries, and this is where all the action really picks up. This is where Jews grow large settlements in East Central Europe, the cities of Prague, in Bohemia and Moravia, and of course in Poland, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And in these places, Jews experience new prosperity and open their minds to new learnings and major changes in culture, prayer, and music. One of the biggest parts of this is the printing press, which appears to have had a similar impact on culture for both Christians and Jews. Now, what do I mean by this? You see, in the medieval age of the manuscript, the people with the books were by and large, who? It was the priests, the clergy. And in prayer and in Bible explication, there was a distinct division of labor. Thus, in Catholicism, the monks and the priests painstakingly made the books and used them to teach the Bible and sing the prayers, and the congregation listened and did their little part. But with the advent of print, now everyone can have a book. And the world starts in that moment to appear as if everyone is a miniature version of a priest. And you can tell this is going to be a lot of changes, social, theological, and musical. Now, I would argue that the exact same thing happens in Judaism in the age of print, because that's exactly what is reported in this Yiddish book, Sefer Lev Tov in 1620. It says, quote, "In the past, there were not so many machzorim, there were not so many prayer books before printing came along. There were not more than 2 or 3 machzorim in the whole synagogue, written on parchment, and no one spoke from them except the cantor, the chazan, yes. And in the past, they had cantors who were heads of yeshivas and who understood well what they said. The others all listened to the cantor as he spoke, so that no one who did not understand said anything. But now, some have a large machzor in front of them and shout louder than the cantor and speak and do not know what they are saying, like a bird or cries or a hound that barks and does not know what it is shouting. It is a wondrous thing that our beautiful, lovely prayers are brought with ignorance and lack of understanding, and that we have to shout and are able to listen to a word that the cantor says. Would it not be better that we should keep quiet and listen to the cantor? Because generally, every cantor understands what he says, and when we listen to the cantor word for word, then we shall fulfill our obligation." So, what we are seeing here is the total subversion of the prayer service hierarchy. Printed prayer books were among the first mass-produced books for the population in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, egged on by mystically driven rabbinic elites wanting everyone to say the words right. Let's give them all a book. But this has an unintended effect. It, just like the Christian Bible made every Christian look like a priest, the printed prayer book makes every individual worshiper look like a cantor. Everyone looks like a cantor. Why? Because now everyone has their own copy of what used to be the cantor's exclusive tools. And as Sefer Lev Tov demonstrates, this causes a cacophony, one which no doubt had effects on the East Central European synagogue and probably caused cantors to be a little bit louder themselves, as well as also created, fundamentally, the sacred cacophony that we know today as davening, right? Davening is the sound of cantorial democracy, where everyone can think for a little minute that they're a cantor. But another thing which we with this august synagogue will appreciate is that in East Central Europe, there's a boom in the building of, quote, great synagogues, most of which were constructed from stone using vernacular Italian church design. These great synagogues were created to accommodate larger groups of worshipers coming to the synagogue in growing Jewish towns in East Central Europe and included larger women's galleries as well. Between the increase in size, the change of building material to that more echo-prone stone, and by the way, you see the difference in ceiling height that these, on the left you have the stonemason, on the right you have the wooden synagogue. We're having a lot higher, and we're having a lot more cavernous chamber-like aesthetics. And so we have a grand aesthetic to go with the grand new architecture of the synagogue. So far, we're seeing Hazzanut emerge out of a tradition of old, orally transmitted melodies with improvisation, as well as melodies of the European street, and which eventually get louder and more cacophonous, with more democratized access to prayer books, and from an environment where many books are sung, from stories of medieval knights to Purim shvils, etc. But here's where things get interesting. You see, in the Middle Ages, being a chazan, you had to be, I would say, pretty frum. You had to have a lot of religious knowledge. Why? Because you had to memorize. You had to memorize the liturgy. You had piyutim. You had the poems in the machzor. But a lot of stuff, including your own poems, you had to make up. But in the age of print, what do you think happens? Everything is standardized, and therefore, the chazan doesn't have to make up his own poetry. And therefore, the candidate pool of chazonim gets a little bit wider, because there's more people who can read the prayer book and sing it than people who can make up their own liturgical poetry for every week. Now, and psychologically, remember, it's important to note, as Nissen Schulman points out, that the fixing of the siddur also eliminates free expression in poetry. And so the only outlet left for creativity in the liturgy goes from the realm of words to the realm of music. You got it. But finally, the kicker is you guys. In the 17th century, the community gets the upper hand over the rabbis. That's because rabbis have contracts. So who's the boss? It's the shul, it's the community, and the rabbis don't have the last say on everything, especially who gets to be cantors. And so many rabbis get very frustrated that communities are choosing musical cantors. The great Polish legal scholar, Rabbi Shlomo Luria, who's a great halachic posek in the 17th century, writes, quote, "The law requires that the rabbi should choose the cantor from among his students. But should the rabbi dare to exercise this right, his recommendation would be rejected by the congregation. It would be futile for the rabbi to protest. The communities retain for themselves and withhold from the rabbi the power of appointment in order that the cantor should remain accountable to them alone and free from the control of the rabbi. As a consequence, the piety of the reader is subordinate to a pleasant voice and clear diction," end quote. But why are the communities choosing more musical cantors? Not just because they can, but because this is a moment of great spiritual need. Jewish mysticism in the form of Lurianic Kabbalah is spreading throughout the Jewish world, inspiring new circles of music making and instrumental Kabbalah Shabbat services, the original Friday Night Live from 300 years ago. In Prague and in other cities, I know this is the home. The mystics say, "Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha," serve the Lord with joy, and what better way to have joy than more music? And not just more music, but new types of music. Anyone recognize this piece of music? We've got Hebrew and we've got sheet music. It can mean only one thing. His name is Salomone Rossi. However, this is not your average copy of Salomone Rossi. This was owned by two Ashkenazic owners. And what do we see on the bottom of the page? We have solfege in Yiddish and music treaties, exercises that you would find in any music treatise for learning to read sheet music. This is from about 1690. And also, this cantor, the second owner of this, is the head of the Nikolsburg community in Moravia. He's also a cantor, and he also does something unprecedented. He writes someone else's music down. When have Yidden been writing people's music down? This is a chiddush. This is a new thing. And so cantors are beginning to think that reading sheet music might be a meaningful tech for sacred composition, for recording melodies, and for getting close to God. So cantors are now empowered by communities to be more musical. The impact of print is expanding canons of knowledge and giving more musical cantors a job. And mysticism is pulling on people's souls and they want to sing with joy. So we've entered the new era of cantorial innovation in early modern Europe. And we get 2 or 3 last little things that I'm going to tell you about here. Number 1, speed davening. At around 11:45, you can hear some good speed davening. I often joke that many Jewish people actually worship two gods, El Adon and El Sha'on, the Lord and the clock. However funny, it's also true, because however much the cantor wants to sing, we are only human, and there's Kiddush at the end of shul. And so cantors begin to sing long, extended melismatic passages, as is their wont, and then they have to speed up the rest to make up for time. It's true in Borough Park today. Ben-Zion Miller, you could hear him do this, and all sorts of other chazanim, blessed memory, Ben-Zion Miller, alav shalom. But you get critiques like this one from Sefer Reshit Bikurim in 1700, quote, for the prayers of the weekday, the cantors sing for an extended time on the vowel ah, as in, I'm quoting directly, as in, V'Yerushalayim Yincha, and afterwards they say several blessings in one breath. So zoging, davening fast, just like today, is actually a 300-year-old technique for making up time when you want to do singing. And in traditional chazanis, being able to zog is a very important skill. But the last major innovation of the 18th century are the Meshurim, who you can see on the left, the cantors on the left near the candelabra, near the menorah, and the two other guys with talesim over their heads are the Meshurim. These are a band of two or more singers, often a bass and then a high-voiced youth, who alternate singing with the cantor in the service. This is not like your typical choir, but it became a marker of Ashkenazic services in the age of cantorial innovation and an art form that went viral from east to west. Some of the evidence we have of this aesthetic, once again, comes from confused Christians. Charles Burney, an Englishman who visited the great Ashkenazic synagogue of Amsterdam in 1775, said this of the service with its Meshurim. Quote, at my first entrance, one of the priests was chanting part of the service in a kind of ancient canto fermo, and responses were made by the congregation in a manner that resembled the hum of bees. After this, three of the sweet singers of Israel, which as it seems are famous here and much attended by Christians as well as Jews, began singing a kind of jolly, modern melody, sometimes in unison and sometimes in parts, to a kind of tol de rol, instead of words, which seemed to be very farcical. One of the voices was a falsette, more like the upper part of a bad vox humana, stop in an organ than a natural voice. The second of these voices was a very vulgar tenor, and the third, a baritono. It is impossible for me to divine what ideas the Jews annex themselves to this vociferation. I shall therefore neither pronounce it to be good nor bad in itself. I shall only say that it is very unlike what we Christians are used to in divine service. Now, what Burney describes, and now we're going to have a little playing from Mr. Fingerhut interpreting one of these manuscripts. What Burney describes is the classic Cantor Meshurim style, which is the main style from about 1740 to 1840. And although he has some reservations, what Burney is correct about is that this style heavily imitated instrumental, musical, and Baroque textures. So we're going to hear one example as cantors start to write sheet music. They have their own little pinkasim, their own little books, and this is by Cantor Shalom Friede from the same synagogue that Mr. Burney visited, the great Ashkenazic synagogue in Amsterdam. You're going to hear about 40 bars of Malchuscha for Friday night, Malchuscha Ra'u Vanecha. It's about a 3-page manuscript. This is only one of the pages. Please. Better than me singing it. And it goes on from there. Well, this florid style may be influenced by cantorial training in musical instruments. A lot of cantors actually were trained as violinists first, like Kashtan, Hirsch Weintraub, in this time. But these Baroque stylings for Hazzanut were to be disciplined and brought in line with Western harmony, with the rise of the choral reforms of Jewish modernity. Solomon Zolzer, the author of Ein Kamocha and most of our Torah service, joined other synagogue composers in leaving behind these old florid ways of 18th century Hazzanut, bringing the artistic and harmonic sensibilities of both the 19th century Catholic Church's harmony and that of Lieder. So as a little second ending treat for you guys, I want to share one of Zolzer's secular compositions, Orientalische Liebesgruß, which he wrote in 1843 when he was on the faculty of the Vienna Conservatory, and it represents the first ever Hebrew art song. That beautiful song. To conclude, and I'll ask, see, you're part of a great chain. Hazzanut, as we know it today, continues to evolve as a hybrid of Western sensibilities and the old style of extended melismas and Baroque ornaments, combining medieval melodies and the unique flavor of Eastern European Jewish music. Now, this recent history is more well-known, and of course includes the influences of things like klezmer and folk song and Tin Pan Alley, the record industry, and even American pop music in the unfolding of the cantorial arts. But what we discover when we look back at these origins is that the cantorate is a bellwether for the changes in our own society. As we have reviewed the origins of Hazzanut, we see times when communities were empowered to consider deep questions. How should we serve God with joy, b'simcha? How do our sacred music professionals enhance that opportunity? How can we reach God through complex, ascendant musical beauty? Hazzanut is not just built on sedimentary layers of history, but on these essential questions which we must ask in each generation, L'dor Vador. Yes.
Before we have a concluding song here, let's give a round of applause for Cantor Matt Austerklein, and thank you so much for your time. And I'm wondering if we could ask you to pull up a chair over here, because your lecture has got me thinking. So we're going to do a little impromptu interview.
Sure.
And then maybe open it up to some questions from the audience. This was so fascinating. I learned a lot. I'm wondering kind of what discoveries in your research into the early history of Hazzanut maybe surprised you most, and how do you see those early traditions influencing synagogue music today, even if we don't if we're not really aware of it?
I think for me, the thing that was most powerful is seeing how even in this moment, especially in Prague, which was like the New York City, or maybe the LA of the musical world in Christian Europe. You can imagine a city which has 40,000 inhabitants, and 11,000 of them are Jews. So it's a very Jewishly dense city, lots of cantors, lots of klezmers. People are asking these deep questions, right, that are so timeless. And what I've been interested in is that you hear both sides of those questions very early. Rabbi Ulmo actually has a passage where he has a gig at a Bohemian noble's house where he's playing like a wedding, and he describes hearing classical music for the first time, being like, oh my goodness, this is so much better than the nasty dance melodies that I have to do all the time. And so you find that people are thinking about what style is appropriate for what context, which is still a timeless question. So I think it's really those timeless questions and some of the things that I said at the end that really, it surprised me how live those questions are today and were in a similar way back then.
And that kind of leads me to my second question. You spoke about this porous nature of Jewish music and how it's absorbed influences from surrounding cultures. So my question for you is, how do we continue to honor that openness while still preserving a sense of Jewish music authenticity?
So I think there are two parts to this. It's a very good question. One is that, what makes something Jewish is, I like to say, Jewish is process over product. And this is true in law as well, right? In the Torah, if you heard me on Sunday, I said this too. In the Torah, we have the Code of Hammurabi, right? An eye for an eye, that's in the Code of Hammurabi. But what's different about it? It's different is in the Code of Hammurabi, there's no equality under the law. If you're a big rich guy and you have a slave and he pokes you, you can kill him. But if you kill him, it's like a $5 fine. But the Torah takes that law and says, ayin tachat ayin is equally applied. Our laws are equally applied. That's a Jewish process. And what we see is, whatever you see cantors doing, and you see the development of Nusach, is people taking the sounds of the street, but applying them for Jewish goals and Jewish needs. And so as long as we have our faith and the needs of the Jewish community, and not just trying to look like something else in mind, then we stay on track. But when we're just imitating and we don't have the end in mind, as like Stephen Covey would say, right, begin with the end in mind, then we lose something. But the other thing is, of course, that we want to sound like a family. And that's the hardest thing, because we come from so many diverse backgrounds. And so, there's an opportunity in every generation to take stock of what does our family sound like, right? Probably the whole reason we have Fregish is because a bunch of us were slaves to the Ottoman Empire when the Ottomans took over a big part of Eastern Europe. So that was part of the family, and that soundscape came all the way over, and so everyone was singing Kol Nidre V'Sorei, right?
Even a part of that, about that Fregish sound, which is so uniquely Jewish to our ears, it doesn't exist in Europe. It doesn't.
It exists later. It does in some of the later manuscripts in the 18th
not in the very
century.
beginning, because that was influenced from when we were surrounded by different cultures who had that sound.
By Muslims as well, exactly. Yes, and Tatars and all sorts of minorities, yeah.
So my question for you is now living in today's world, and especially in this digital age where we can easily live stream. I remember live streaming Hoshana Rabbah at the Great Synagogue in Rome. It's phenomenal. You can see all of our cultures around the world. People can share their own music. People can share their cultures. Are we living now in a new golden age of Hazzanut, or Jewish music, to kind of help move us into the future?
I think we are living in, I think it was Tyler Cowen that says we're like living in the 17th century, right? The 1600s. It's a very dynamic age. Like, this is just when Shakespeare's plays have gotten big and launched, but there's a lot of change in our society. So, while I don't know, with the diversity that the internet has brought so many, it's brought so many things in dialogue, and trends are moving so fast. And yet the great moment, I think the golden age moment, is that we can all find amazing resources that have been gathered for each of our edot, for Ashkenazi Jews, for Sephardi Jews, for Italian Jews, the work that the National Library of Israel has done. I maintain a website with the Cantor's Assembly that gathers Hazzanut manuscripts. Like the ability to have a digital Edah to teach our family music, whatever it may be, is really unprecedented. So there are challenges, but there's also unprecedented opportunity as well.
Thank you. That answers my questions. I'm wondering if anyone has any questions that they would like to. Jerry?
There's no many questions to ask. Maybe I'll ask most of them afterwards. But does any of our music predate the Ashkenazi period that we know about, or is there just no way to know what the synagogue sounded like? That's one question. The other question is the pieces that you did sound very Western European, German, English, and Russian, Polish. It sounds not completely different, but I mean, I could hear if Jewish music comes from Eastern Europe versus Western Europe. Maybe you can comment on that.
I'll start with that and then do the harder one. So the reality is that what we associate with as Eastern European music is really a function. My feeling on it is actually much later. You have to, in the same way that Yiddish evolved from Western Yiddish, and then eventually we got two branches, Eastern Yiddish and Western Yiddish, as Eastern Europe developed really in the age of the Hasidim in the 18th century. So you have a full-blown Eastern European sound, by the early 19th century in a way. So I think that kind of Oy Vezmir thing that we know is a function of the evolution of that Yiddish, which has a lot of Slavic and Ottoman and other influences in it that percolate in over time. But Poland in the 1600s is a bunch of Baroque stuff. And even is Baroque sounding music. It's more Western sounding. And that, again, what we heard from the 15th century, that's from Prague, which is really in East Central Europe. It's has Germanic influence, but it's close to, and they didn't even speak Yiddish for a while. They spoke Canaan. They spoke their own type of Jewish Czech, Judeo-Czech, before Yiddish really went viral everywhere, all over Ashkenazi Jewry. Even though we didn't have things that sounded particularly Oy Vezmir, Ashkenazi and Eastern European, that sound is, I think, a little bit later of a sound. Certainly 1750 and on, we get more of it. But in terms of antiquity, people just didn't write stuff down. And that's the excitement of early music, is whenever you're doing, I just did a conference on this on Sunday at UCLA. And whenever you're doing early music, you're kind of trying to reconstruct, and you have to go back and find thick descriptions from Christians, or I guess from Visigoths in the 8th century going to the synagogue. It's very difficult, and we really don't know a ton, but there's also a lot of opportunity for research as well. That's why I think this field is so exciting.
Thank you. Oh, thanks, Amanda. Thank you so much for giving us this tremendous and inspiring and passionate lecture. I think it only makes us want to learn more and go deeper. So thank you, and thank you, Benjamin. My question would be, say from 1685, Bach is born, and his huge involvement with the church, and then going on to write all kinds of masses. I don't have to go on. Did you come across in any of your studies any correspondence between, or any involvement between Bach and the Chazans of the time, composers of the time?
So this is a question of whether Bach met any Jews. Unfortunately, Leipzig was Judenrein. Leipzig had no Jews. Handel might have run into some Jews, and I'll tell you why. And not just because he and I will go to the same university, because he went to University of Halle, so I know all about Handel. This is how people claim someone. He went to the university for law school for 1 year and then out, and they claim him. So what's interesting about Handel worked in Hamburg, for example, in his first opera, I think Elmira, and some of his other early biblical operas that we don't have the music for, they were all premiered there in Hamburg in the turn of the 18th century. And Jews were going to the opera at the turn of the 18th century. Why? Because we have the rules saying ladies cannot go to the opera. And then later, ladies cannot go to the opera except on Hanukkah. And so there are, because in Hamburg in 1678 is the first public opera house in all of Europe, in the German-speaking, not all of Europe, in Germany specifically. So it's possible that Jews heard Italian, Ashkenazi Jews heard Italian Handel's operas, but I know certainly, and then my colleague Paul Feller-Simmons has done detailed, he has the bills. The Dutch cantors, especially the Portuguese Dutch cantors in Amsterdam, went to the opera all the time. And that is because they were hanging out with the merchant class and the upper middle class of Amsterdam. I remember once my colleague John Schultz, who was in the Wizards of Ashkenaz, recorded one of these Baroque baruchos that were written at this time, and it goes like this. It is long, and it's, you know what it's there? They have it says Benigun Orlebuski. Who is Orlebuski? It's Johann Orlebusch, who is a gigging organ and Christian organ player in these salons and in these circles that Jews are working in. So they got the Orlebusch is nigun, and they're like nigun Orlebuski, right? They quote him, and they're not ashamed of it. So there is this very dynamic, and it's more with the Sephardim because the Ashkenazim are poor. They are much poorer, and the Sephardim are annoyed at them for doing this kind of not as refined singing, but which I like. So.
First of all, thank you again for being here. It's wonderful. You're wonderfully talented. It's an honor to be in the presence of two wonderfully talented cantors. My question is, so you had that one slide about the development of synagogues. At some point, we came upon larger, grander synagogues, and I suppose I asked this question because I grew up in a conservative tradition with amplified music. Were there any acoustical studies? Were there designs of those synagogues? Because with this beautiful music in a large synagogue with no electric amplification, boy, that in terms of the qualities of a cantor, endurance, vocal strength, those have to be major characteristics to do an entire service.
Yeah, we're really, thank you for that question. We're really, it's what's exciting about this field is really just at the beginning. And I think for my dissertation, I didn't really focus on reconstruction of the synagogue service, but we're at a point where we can begin to think about reconstructing from a time perspective because we have lists of where the cantors would improvise, where they would sing melismas, where they would have to speed up, and then we have the actual, some of these synagogues we still have that are older, that are the great synagogues that are still, we have the structures. So it would take a real study to judge okay, what did Christians have to do to adapt to these analogous forms in their churches, and how would a Jewish person have to do that? One thing that I know is that this thing, the bone conduction thing where you put your hand here, Jews picked this up. And rabbis go crazy because they're, what are you doing? Why are you doing bone conduction? Why are you trying to hear yourself? They're grabbing their ears. It's crazy to the rabbis. But of course we see as early as the 16th century, Christians grabbing their ears as they gather around a piece of a madrigal, right? A piece of church music. And so there might be something where we're picking that up because it's needed in order to make sure that we, project. There are little bits of European Christian vocal technique that come through some of these sources, and we're really just at the beginning of that kind of understanding. But I think that the architecture piece is really important because obviously it's very different. If the ceiling was here, it would be very different davening than with the ceiling up there.
I don't know what brought it to me, but this reminded me when you were talking about Gregorian chant and how we oftentimes think that, maybe Gregorian chant influenced the early Chazanim, but I want to kind of, hafuch, make it the opposite, that maybe it was the Christians who were hearing Jewish music, and those were the ones who wrote it down, and then therefore, if they're taking the Gregorian chant and it's being passed down, notated in the Christian world, perhaps could that be the earliest origins of what music sounded even as early as temple times. Is there any thesis in that?
I mean, the person who's written about this, I mean, this is very, very tantalizing because everyone wants to get back as far as you can. The person who's written about this is Eric Werner. Here's my feeling on it. Jewish music, like Christianity was a Jewish sect, but then it transformed into a non-Jewish sect. And while I do believe that there are analogous teachings in the early church and the rabbis on the role of music, which should have no instruments in the early church, right? They were just chants. But as, for example, with Constantine, when the Roman Empire and more, sort of pagan and ex-pagan cultures pick up Christianity, they have to adapt. They adopt, the pagan images and figures as saints, right? They're very adaptive in that environment. So I'm not surprised if they pick up the local music from that environment. So it feels good to be able to think, and I do think that the early Christians were probably taking Jewish melodies, but that by the 8th century, I'm not so sure that we can be definitive about any of it, but I'd love to be proven wrong.
Any further questions? One more from Jerry.
You'd mentioned Rossi, and when I've heard Rossi, he sounds very different than what I think of as Hazzanut today. So how does it fit in? Because it doesn't sound at all like.
No, yeah. Rossi is...
when I've seen Rossi done.
Rossi,
today.
First of all, is an Italian Jew. He is not an Ashkenazi Jew. He's the Italians, and especially the Sephardic Jews, were a little more well-heeled. But Rossi works, he has 300 compositions. The Ashiri Mashali Shlomo is Hebrew. There's only one book that he wrote. He was a pop guy. His friend was, friends with Monteverdi, which, by the way, is a funny joke. The guy there's this guy, Noah Greenberg, who started the early music movement in New York. He was a big mover. And he said, I am Monteverdi. Why? Because Monteverdi translates to green mountain, Greenberg. They have the same translation. But anyway, it's a long story short. He is working in a court context, and he is a court musician, and it's just a different tradition. The Ashkenazi Jews, actually, Leon de Modena writes about the Ashkenazi Jews, and what does he say about them? They sing the most. That's what he says about them. They sing the most. They don't sing orderly or nicely, but they sing the most. So Ashkenazi Jews do have a particularity about them in their commitment to piyutim, to like that kind of Srumi Shalom liturgical singing, even more than the Sephardim or the Italians. And so Rossi is just in a different category. All right, so I want to thank you guys for coming out as we sing our concluding song. Again, one of the things that Sinai Temple does so well, and that this lecture tonight is about, is that we are committed to the cantorial arts as expressions of our spiritual journeys from one generation, from as far back as we can go, seeing to the medieval period, to this one, Lador Vador.
We all know it. I invite you to put your arms around each other, rise as we conclude.
Ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador, nagid gonecha, ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, kedushatcha. Nagdish ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador, nagid gonecha, ulenetzach netzachim, netzachim, kedushatecha nagdish, v'shivchacha Eloheinu, mipinu lo yamush le'olam וקדוש אתה לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקיש. ברוך אתה אדוני, ברוך שמו,
One final round of applause for our wonderful Chazan, Matt Austerklein. Thank you
Thank you
so
very
much
much,
for all that you do. Kol hakavod, my friend.
Thank you. תודה רבה.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.